for one reason or another, they weren't guiding me to make ultimately the right decisions because I was still facing these challenges. And so I started thinking about and consuming more information and specifically reading papers, biomechanics and physiology papers to try to understand how could I better achieve my running goals faster, more efficiently? Were there other tools that I could use? Was there other data I could measure about my body and my running that could make me and help me make smarter training decisions? And so at some point, I landed on biomechanics papers and this concept of monitoring our movement and monitoring the forces that are acting on our body, and
Mhm.
realized that this information provided tremendously valuable insight, but was locked away in essentially biomechanics labs. So the only way to get this valuable insight about how you move and about the forces that are acting on your body is to go into a lab and have a pretty expensive, time consuming, inconvenient gait analysis done, which provides a wealth of information, but for the large majority of runners is not something that is particularly accessible or something that we're able to do. And obviously it's a snapshot in time if you do it, right? You're not getting that information on every single step in your usual training environment. And so all of this research and reading and diving deep and speaking with leading experts, coaches, and researchers in the space eventually led me to identify an opportunity to leverage advancements in technology, the
Mhm.
ability to pretty cost effectively in a very small format embed technology in our shoes, which we were already wearing in a way that was, again, non invasive, incredibly durable, completely waterproof, to all of a sudden turn our shoes into this vehicle for this amazing data and then use that data, translate that data into insights that could help me and other runners minimize their risk of injury and improve their performance.
Hey, runners, we track miles, we track heart rates, sleep, recovery, but not how we move and how our move acting on our body. So what do? We guess. Sometimes we push too hard, and at times not enough. True insight about impact and form are locked away inside perfectly simulated labs. Wouldn't it be amazing to get the insights from where all the action is, our feet? That's what Royi Metser, founder of Avelo, set out to do, creating world's smartest shoe. A world-class shoe as foundation, Avelo Super Trainer shoes have a patent-pending technology, an AI-powered running sensor embedded in the midsole. It collects consistent, accurate data and your personalized coach. And the best part? No charging required for the life of the shoe. In my discussion with Roy, we chatted about the founding story of Avelo, about the amazing team behind Avelo and how it is redefining the right set of metrics for runners, like impact score, resiliency score, form rudder, and efficiency score. So let's dive in to learn about the world's smartest shoe. I'm your host, Kamal Dada, and this is What Runs a Run. Welcome, Roy, to the pod. Glad to have you here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm always fascinated about the tech behind shoes and the runners that are spend so much time on running and training for races. And one of their biggest asset is the running shoe they use to get trained, and in the race day, all the sweat and all goes in. And you're doing something amazing with a Velo to solve a problem that's not been solved ever. So can you kick us off with what is Avelo running?
Absolutely. So we're building a smart running shoe. So it's a new way of innovating in running shoes. There's been tremendous innovation over the last, I would say, 10 to 20 years in footwear, mostly in materials innovation, which has led to lighter shoes, more responsive shoes, and record breaking performances. And of course, we're leveraging the best materials available.
Yeah.
We're also adding digital technology and embedding the shoe with a sensor that can provide feedback to every runner about their biomechanics. So the running form and the forces that are acting on their body. And that data can be used to provide insight around optimizing performance, around running more efficiently, around minimizing risk of injury. And ultimately, the goal is to provide information to runners that can help them accomplish whatever it is they're looking to accomplish in their running journey faster, better, more efficiently with less setbacks.
Fascinating. I have to unpack every piece of it that you
Sure.
mentioned. That's a
Yeah.
lot in terms of um, different aspects and how it can help runners. But let's go back. I'm very curious about the story of Avelo, how your personal journey led to solve a problem that not been solved yet.
Yeah, so I found running a few years ago. It was something that I always enjoyed doing as part of my overall fitness routine, and I've always been into health and fitness. It's an important part of my life since I was very young. I grew up in a family with parents that prioritized health and fitness, and so I grew up playing team sports in basketball, soccer, but then a CrossFit at some point in my adult life, and was always into lifting weights. I had to run a few half marathons, and my dad was also always someone that loved to run, so I would run with him. But running used to be something I would do for cardio, and that changed in around 2021 when at the time I was living up in the Northeast in Boston, and after about a year and a half of living in during the pandemic and falling into poor health for honestly the first time in my adult life, and I know now that it's an experience that many others share with me. I found running during that time as a way to make a change that I felt was needed to kind of turn my health around. It was actually a blood test that I did that led me to discover some things about my body that I felt needed to improve. I had very high cholesterol. I had a biological age that was much higher than my real age. And so I decided to sign up for my first marathon, kind of cold turkey, honestly, so that I could have a goal to shoot for and follow a training plan and provide some structure for me to kind of get off the couch and back into training and back into fitness. And so I started training that week. It was the spring of 2021. And for 6 months, I became a runner. And through the process of training for this marathon, and it followed a training plan, hired a coach, and it was through that experience of training for that race and then completing it that I fell in love with the process of running as my primary form of fitness, and I started to really think about running as the primary form of fitness for me and the thing that I had goals around. And after finishing that race, it really I left that race with fuel to improve at running. And I know many others experienced this in their first marathon. It was a pretty challenging race for me. I hit the wall around mile 20 or 22. And so
Yeah.
I kind of fell short of the goal that I had. And so that was also very motivating for me to get back on the horse, so to speak, and try to run another one and really conquer this really
Mhm.
challenging goal.
I was curious, what kind of scan was it? I know DEXA scan talks about biological age. Is it kind of a blood test supporting the DEXA scan?
I was working for a company called Insight Tracker at the time,
Ah,
leading business
okay.
development. And that's a company, amazing company based in Boston and Kendall Square, that we built technology that analyzes blood biomarkers, DNA test
Ah, I see.
results, wearable device data. So the biological age was based on those biomarkers.
Wow. And you said you gained, you were more than the actual age, the biological age was showing? Okay.
I was 31 at the time, and my biological age, it's called inner age on Insight Tracker, was 41. So it was telling me that I was 10 years older biologically than I was chronologically.
Okay. That must be a eye-opening moment for
It
sure.
was
Yeah.
definitely a kick in the butt, that's for sure. That combined with some of the individual markers, again, I had high cholesterol, and again, at 30, 31, it was something that I had been monitoring for a while and was able to get it down with nutrition and lifestyle. And then after being sedentary for a long time and my diet not being as good for a period of about a year and a half, it had skyrocketed again. So that was also part of the impetus for making a change.
No, that's great. I'm glad that you could make the change, and I'm sure it's in the right direction. I'm sure fun by now, for sure.
It's improved, that's for sure. Yeah, running is good for you if you can, yeah, if you
Yeah,
can stick with it. Absolutely.
yeah. Um, so I think you went in the journey, you started your running journey with the marathon. I think you continued the journey. At what point the idea for Avelo kind of formed, and what problems you saw? Because you yourself as a runner probably saw something in the market that was lacking.
Yeah, I mean, I was tracking everything about my body and about my training, everything I could get my hands on. Of course, I mentioned the blood tests and DNA tests, and I was wearing a Garmin watch and measuring my sleep and, of course, distance, pace, and heart rate during my training and my HRV and my recovery. And yet, I faced some challenges as a runner myself. It felt like training for the marathon and training to improve at running was a at times frustrating process of trial and error, trying things and uh, seeing the result and sometimes experiencing setbacks, plateauing, performance not improving as quickly or as much as I wanted. And the worst problem was the injuries that I faced, which is just I mean, unfortunately, an inevitable part of running.
Yeah.
I think every person that's trained for a race, almost everyone, or has run for an extended period of time, has unfortunately experienced an injury at some point in their journey. It's just a risk that we take when we push our bodies. But
Yeah.
it was really frustrating for me because I felt like I was doing everything right, and I was consuming all of the guidance and content that I could to become educated and smarter on how to train in the best possible way to accomplish my goals. At some point, I even worked with a coach. I was following a training plan, trying to make all the right decisions, and yet still I experienced these really frustrating setbacks and, again, in some cases, injuries. And something felt missing in the products that I was using, the tools that I had available, the data that I was using to measure my running and make decisions about my performance and my health. For one reason or another, they weren't guiding me to make ultimately the right decisions because I was still facing these challenges. And so I started thinking about and consuming more information and specifically reading papers, biomechanics and physiology papers, to try to understand how could I better achieve my running goals faster, more efficiently? Were there other tools that I could use? Was there other data I could measure about my body and my running that could make me and help me make smarter training decisions? And so at some point, I landed on biomechanics papers and this concept of monitoring our movement and monitoring the forces that are acting on our body, and
Mhm.
realized that this information provided tremendously valuable insight, but was locked away in essentially biomechanics labs. So the only way to get this valuable insight about how you move and about the forces that are acting on your body is to go into a lab and have a pretty expensive, time consuming, inconvenient gait analysis done, which provides a wealth of information, but for the large majority of runners is not something that is particularly accessible or something that we're able to do. Obviously, it's a snapshot in time if you do it, right? You're not getting that information on every single step in your usual training environment. And so all of this research and reading and diving deep and speaking with leading experts, coaches, and researchers in the space eventually led me to identify an opportunity to leverage advancements in technology, the
Mhm.
ability to pretty cost effectively in a very small format embed technology in our shoes, which we were already wearing, in a way that was,
Right.
again, non-invasive, incredibly durable, completely waterproof, to all of a sudden turn our shoes into this vehicle for this amazing data, and then use that data, translate that data into insights that could help me and other runners minimize their risk of injury and improve their performance.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm wonder, I'm sure it has been tried in the past. Probably there is a lack of innovation or technology probably did not let to get to the insight that you want. The gait analysis that you mentioned, I think that's also another limitation is it's very controlled. It's not a
Exactly.
naturally data that's been collected. It's like it's more on everything is monitored in a controlled environment and you simulate a running, it may not be natural run that you would do outside taking it away. You're just doing a natural go out run, and then you have the technology there to collect the data and give you an insight. So,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean that you're spot on, and that's a challenge for. It's a limitation of that information because, as you said, you're running on a treadmill. Some of us run on treadmills, but many of us
Uh,
also run
hate
outdoors, right?
hate running in
Um,
treadmills.
yeah, some
Yeah,
people hate it and they only
yeah,
run outside, right? So
yeah.
that's a limitation. It's a treadmill, which it's different than running on roads or running on trails.
Right.
Someone's watching you run.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
might be running differently when someone's watching you than when you're out on your own
yeah,
or running
yeah.
with a group. It's a few minutes.
Right.
right? So you're not going to have an opportunity to really run for long enough to settle into your typical running pattern. And of course, you can't simulate how you run out in the world every day and on every step in just a few minutes. And so there's a lot of limitations to that, not just for that specific analysis, but this is something that I realized was also a limitation of the research that had been published around running biomechanics, running performance, running related injuries that were it's just an inherent constraint of research that we're relying on data that's collected in these same environments, these same very controlled environments that are very small and short snapshots in time, often from very small groups of runners, right? You look at some of these papers that are published in biomechanics and physiology, they're typically small samples. They're 10, 20, 50, maybe 100 runners. That's like considered a pretty typical size for one of these studies. And
Oh, okay.
it is what it is. It's hard to do big studies, especially ones that are long. And so part of my vision too, when I got into this was, well, how amazing would it be for us to unlock insight and monitor these data points from many more runners. So rather than just having 10 or 50 or even 100 runners, what if we
Yeah.
had tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands or one day millions of runners that were collecting this data out in their usual training environment, runners of different abilities, different ages, different
Right.
goals, different running patterns,
Mm,
different training histories? And what if we could use this data to unlock new insight
mhm.
about what leads to optimal performance and what ultimately leads us to get injured? And these are very complicated, complex questions. There's so many variables that affect
Right.
these both performance and injury. And so really the only way to answer these questions is to collect high quality data over long periods of time from a lot of different people, because ultimately injury and performance happens for very different reasons for different people.
Absolutely. And you're so right on. And it's a very complex problem to solve as well. So, what are the right metrics? I know you are in a process of, real shoes coming out and you're going to get the feedback, start collecting the data, and your vision is on its way to come to the fruition. What are the data from your understanding that is important or the key metrics that people, as a runner, I should be educating myself or anyone should be educating themselves?
Yeah, one of the big ones that I realized pretty quickly was mechanical load. So this is the physical stress that's applied to your muscles, tendons, ligaments, bones during running, right? So you've felt this. You feel it every time you run. It's impact, right? You hit the ground
Right.
and there is a physical stress that's applied to your body, to your musculoskeletal system. And every one of those impacts, so on every single step, you're causing damage to your muscles, tendons, and bones. And that's a good thing. That's
Mhm.
actually what creates and stimulates the adaptation that leads to better performance, right? So you create this damage. Ideally, you recover properly from that damage,
Right.
right? You rest, you recover, you do an easy run.
Mhm.
And as a result, your body builds back stronger and you're able to handle more running,
Yeah.
faster running. And
Mhm.
that process repeats itself. And ultimately, that leads to better performance. Now, when you get into trouble is when you apply more of this mechanical load. So, more stress than your body is capable of handling at that point. So, it's an equation of load versus capacity. Load being the stress that's applied, and capacity being your body's ability to handle that
Correct.
stress.
I see.
Now, the way that most of us runners monitor our training and monitor what we call training load today is we're using mileage or duration, right? So the number of miles typically that we're running on a weekly basis, so weekly miles, or the number of hours that we're running on a weekly basis. That's probably the most common way that runners are monitoring their training. And unfortunately, that is in most cases a very oversimplified way of quantifying your training. Some runners are even using heart rate based measures, like there's training load scores that use heart rate during running to understand the physiological load on your body. But we're missing a critical piece of the puzzle, and that is better mechanical load monitoring. So quantifying the forces that are being applied on our muscles, tendons, and bones during every running step, and then using that information to make smarter decisions so that we know what is the true stress that my body is under during running. And therefore, how much should I run today, this week? How hard should I run today, this week to push enough, apply enough stress to improve, but not exceed my body's capacity. So that's one critical piece of the training load puzzle that's currently missing that we're shining a light on.
So that's fascinating. So the how do you get the capacity part of it? Because when I'm running, so you can measure the impact or the load I have, or I'm zone to running or zone whatever zone I'm running in based on my training plan or the mileage that I have for my training plans. Like I started New York, trained for New York now. I'm at what long runs around 10, 12 miles range at this point, and then a couple of runs. And I have no idea where I'm leading to injury. So that's kind of the I hope that I never get to. But you're
Yep.
saying if I know what my capacity is going into the run, and I have kind of a feedback loop going on to say, hey, okay, don't push yourself. Maybe you should do a zone two today if you're doing a 6 mile. But how do you get to the capacity data point? Because I feel like it's somehow feed that so that you can get the feedback back to the runner, right?
Yeah. So we've worked with some of the leading researchers in this space, PhDs in physiology, biomechanics, coaches, physical therapists, to come up with mathematical models that essentially model your training load and model your capacity over time. And so you can think of every training session, there's both a positive effect and a negative effect to that training session. The negative effect is that that stress and ultimately the fatigue or the damage that's caused by that training session. The positive effect is again the fitness that's built up over time or the capacity that's built up over time from that session. And every training session has both of those stimulus, both a positive and a negative effect. There's mathematical models that allow you to model the positive and negative training effects of every training session. And in this case, the input to that mathematical model is this impact, right? So this mechanical load. And so we're able to quantify the mechanical load, the mechanical stress of every run, and then use that to model both your negative training effects, so the short term damage and fatigue that's being accumulated by that training, by that mechanical load,
I
and then
see.
also the capacity that's built up over time, that positive training effect. And then it's about creating a model that tries to optimize the balance of capacity and load over time. And so there's a few contributors which we can go into if you want that go into what we call the resiliency score, which is a daily measure that's
I'm
looking at
very curious
your,
about that metrics. I think
yeah,
some of the
sure.
things that you highlighted too.
Sure.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So it looks at your patterns of impact, your patterns of training essentially, which again, this concept of mechanical load, or we call it an impact score, which is every run gets an impact score, which takes into account the distance of that run and also the intensity of the run. So by intensity, I mean the force, the magnitude of the force that's applied on your body.
Hmm.
Um, and so we can understand holistically how impactful, how stressful was that run. And then we have models that look at all of your runs over time and then generate a daily score for you. So we call this the resiliency score. And there's a
I see.
few inputs to this score, contributors to this score. We look at short term load. So we call this acute load, which is one of the things that's been shown in the literature to spike your risk of injury is if you spike your training load over the last, let's say, week. So let's say you do a really hard training session. You go for a 20-mile long run where your previous longest long run was 10 miles. I'm giving a very simple example, right? So in that case, you're spiking your training load pretty far beyond what your body is used to handling, right? The way to get to 20 miles is as you're doing right now, you're progressing through long runs at 10,
Yeah.
11, 12, then you rest, right? Then
Right.
13, 14, 15, then you rest, right? That's the way you get to 20. But if you all of a sudden do something that your body is not used to,
Right.
then that's when you can get into trouble, right? And there's cases where that's simple, but there's cases where it's not because this training load there's a lot of variables to it. It's not just the distance you're running, it's also the intensity, it's the surface you're running on, it's whether you're running uphill or downhill. And so by creating this impact score, which is based on the forces that are acting on your body and all of these other variables, we're able to get a more precise measurement of the stress that your body is under and therefore give you better insight on whether you're overdoing it or whether you're training in a safe zone. And this is not an easy thing to get right.
Huh.
And of course, we're coming out with something that we feel is really strong based on this novel measure of training load and based on the work that we've done with leading researchers and coaches. And over time, these models that we're developing will get smarter.
So, Roy, is it, am I got it correct that if I got on, say, put on a pair of shoes, Avelo shoes, and go for a
Mhm.
run, when I go for a run first time, you would start to measure, like start collecting data, obviously from a resiliency score point of view. But to get to the capacity, you are looking probably starting from zero. Did I get it correct? And you are personalizing based on the data you're collecting
Exactly.
for me as
Exactly.
Kamal running. And
Exactly.
then the feedback loop starts from there. Oh, okay.
Exactly. So it takes a little. So of course we
Right.
start collecting data on your first run. You
Yeah.
unlock these insights over time. So over the
Right.
first few weeks, it's building the model for you, right? So it's creating baselines for you, and you need to collect some data to unlock these insights. So after just a few runs, you will start to unlock the resiliency score, and it'll calibrate. So in other words, it'll have enough data on you after a few weeks, and it'll get more personalized to you over time as you continue to train with the product.
That's fascinating because now you can tell that this is really personalized for you or for myself versus
Correct.
it's not a generic algorithm of another 20 million
Correct.
runners, which may not be applicable to a person because where they are, what kind of condition they are in, or their different factors come into play, what level of fitness they have, and then what kind of feedback you can give it back to them. That's amazing. Any other key metrics other than resilience score that is important that runners should learn about?
Of course, yeah. So the impact and resiliency score is one big category, like I said. And then, so another big category is what we call efficiency. So we have an efficiency score. By efficiency, I'm essentially referring to, you can think of it like the miles per gallon of your body. So if you're an efficient runner, that means you will be able to hold a particular pace for longer. And so that's been shown to be one of the best determinants of running performance is how efficiently you're moving. So in other words, you're able to put out a lot of work or run a particular pace, and it costs you very little physiologically to run that pace or to put out that much work. And so we're finally able to quantify how much mechanical work you're putting out. So the propulsion that you're putting out during running.
Yeah.
And we're looking at the physiological cost of that work. So in other words, how much work are you doing and how much is it costing you physiologically to do it? So we use heart rate for that. So we integrate with your other wearable devices. We're obviously not measuring heart rate ourselves. We don't need to do that from the foot. Most runners are using a smartwatch to get heart rate or a chest strap. And so based on these two measurements, we can help you understand, are you very efficient? Are you doing a lot of mechanical work and for very little cost? Or are you, on the contrary, inefficient, right? Are you not doing
Right.
a lot of work and is it costing you a lot to produce that work? And how is that changing over time? And how does that change with different running form, right? So how can you tweak your running form in order to see if you can optimize your mechanical efficiency? So this is another big area where, runners may have heard of the concept of running economy, which is a little bit different than what I'm describing, which it looks at your oxygen consumption to see how much oxygen are you consuming to run a particular pace. And the best runners in the world are able to hold a particular pace and consume relatively little oxygen to do it because they're very metabolically and mechanically efficient. But to get that information, you'd have to go into a lab. So we're making this concept of efficiency and quantifying your running efficiency available on every single step and over time so you can see how you're improving over time and optimize it.
That's cool. So the two words that came to my mind is the VO2 max that a lot of runners talk about. And
Mm-hmm.
then this is the power meters, the power that you put throughput in the watts, right? That's measured today. Are
Yeah.
you saying that efficiency score kind of combines the both, or this is that separate metrics altogether?
It's a separate measure. So we're not looking at necessarily a VO2 max. VO2 max is the total amount of oxygen, the maximum amount of oxygen that you can consume. So it's essentially the size of your engine. It's more of a physiological and a metabolic marker. So it's an important one, but it's not the most important, honestly. We're looking at mechanical efficiency. So you can think of it as how efficiently are you moving through space? So you don't want a lot of wasted motion, for
Yeah,
example, right? So like if you're bouncing up and down too much, you may have heard of like vertical oscillation as a
yeah,
measurement
yeah,
that some watches even try to estimate, right? So that means if you have a high vertical oscillation, that means your center of mass is moving up and down in the vertical direction quite a bit on every running step. That that could lead to wasted motion, right? Because what you're trying to do during running is you're trying to move forward
Right.
as efficiently as possible. And so some vertical oscillation, of course, you need because you're propelling yourself upwards on every step. But
Right.
too much could lead you to expending energy in the vertical direction instead of the horizontal direction, moving forward. And so that's a very simple example of you want to be moving forward with little wasted energy. And so we're helping you understand how efficiently are you moving through space and help you optimize that.
That's awesome. That's good to know. And then let's talk about the feedback the runners get back. So you talked about resiliency score, efficiency score. Any other metric before you get to the feedback loop, or the two key metrics that you're looking
No,
at?
the last category is what we call, so it's around running form. So
Okay.
specifically how you move. And there's a lot of misconceptions on running form, unfortunately. I think a lot of runners believe that there is one particular
Yeah.
correct way to run,
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
reality is that's not true. And you see this in elite athletes and elite runners with drastically different running forms. And that's because you can be successful with many different types of running, and it's really unique to you. So we think about it and we call it your running signature. And what we help you understand is, what is your unique running signature? What is the way that you move? And what does that mean? And we look at measurements like your foot strike pattern. So are you a forefoot striker, midfoot, or rear foot striker? How much you pronate or supinate? How much time you spend on the ground and in the air? So contact time and flight time. Symmetry between your left side and your right side, because there's a sensor in each shoe. Like I said, ground reaction force. And then we help you understand what these metrics mean. And then we monitor them over time. And we alert you anytime there's a change in your unique running signature, which is when you might be getting into trouble. You might be experiencing fatigue. Maybe even there's an injury coming on and you don't know about it yet. And so that's how we think about your running signature. And we
Mhm.
can alert you in real time and post run if we observe a deviation from your typical running signature.
So you're challenging that you don't have to land on the front versus back of the foot, huh?
You do not. You absolutely
Okay.
not. Yeah, for a long time, runners believed that there was a best way to land, and
Yeah.
I think for a long time, midfoot or forefoot striking was touted as the optimal way to run, and it's just not true. You see elite runners run with a rear foot strike pattern. Yeah, it's actually been shown that one versus the other doesn't lead to better performance or even greater injury risk.
That's fascinating for sure. Because that will open up a lot of people that heard over the period of time that you can't land on the back of your feet.
No, and
Like,
generally changing your foot strike pattern, unless there's a really good reason to do so and you're working with a professional that's guiding you through that process, changing your foot strike pattern is generally not recommended. It carries a lot of risk. Yeah, it carries a lot of risk because what you do when you change your foot strike pattern is you're changing the way that this stress is distributed on your body. And so when you change it, if you don't do it gradually, you might overload muscles or tendons or bones in your body that were not prepared
mhm.
for load, because you haven't been running that way in the past. And so it should be done with caution. And in most cases, it's not something that you really need to focus on changing.
Yeah, because you're retraining your body to go out of your natural way of running to something that you heard that optimized for running, but it's not your natural way of running. So you have to be careful first to adapt
Right.
that. And that may take longer. I know some people, runners who try so hard and extra cautious when they're landing their feet. And I have to land on the front, not at the back. I can see that they're looking at their feet and they're running and they look at the front.
Sure.
I'm
Sure.
sure you have seen too enough in the training, but if you don't have a right coach, yeah, it can be challenging and you can injure yourself in the process for sure.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of myths there, and we do hope to bust some of those myths. But yeah, again, ultimately, the way you move is unique. There's not necessarily a right or wrong way to
Yeah.
move. You should know the implications of your running form. So when you strike the ground with the front of your foot, forefoot strike, you're stressing your calf muscle and your Achilles tendon more than if you are a rear foot striker, a heel striker,
Right.
which sends more of that stress further up the body to the knee, to the hip. And so it's not better or worse, it's just different. And having
Right.
information and knowledge about that just makes you a smarter runner.
Makes sense. Make total sense. Now, thank you for sharing this three key metrics that runners should get to know. So I'll repeat again: resiliency score, the efficiency score, and in the last word you said the running
Form radar.
signature,
Yeah.
form
Yeah. Yeah.
rather, or the running signature.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. And now, how does the feedback come to the runners? I know you have the shoe, a chip is embedded in the midsole, and you have an app that the feedback is coming at. But I think that one of the coolest thing about Avelo shoes, running shoes, is that you can get real-time feedback as you're running. So how does that magic
Yeah.
happens?
Yeah. So, first of all, the process of using it is pretty simple. So, it pairs over Bluetooth. So, you get the product, you pair it, and then you start running. We're using a battery that's non rechargeable. So, it's a pretty simple battery, but what that means is that the battery lasts for the entire life of the shoe. So, there's smart algorithms in the sensor that only turn it on or off when it needs to be on or off. And so, you never have to charge the product, which is really nice. It automatically starts tracking when you run. So, you don't have to open up a separate app and the Avelo app and start the run in the Avelo app. You just start running and it automatically knows that you're running and starts tracking your run and then it stops when you're done. Once you're done running, you get back to your phone. You don't have to run with your phone, although for real-time feedback, you do need a phone. But if you don't care about the real-time feedback, you don't. You get back to your phone, you sync the data off the sensors, they sync over Bluetooth, and then you get all the post-run insights, right? The impact score, resiliency score, efficiency score, form radar. And then you get coaching. So post run and in between runs, there's coaching around how hard and how much you should be running to optimize the amount of impact that your body is taking, but not apply so much impact that you increase your risk of injury too much. And so again, this is based on this balance of training load and capacity. So each week and each day, you're going to get personalized recommendations for how much and how hard to train that day and week to keep you in that safe zone.
When does you mentioned that you usually initially when I start running, you'll collect the data for some time. What is the time period looks like, or it changes by person to person?
Now you
Week or
start,
2 weeks?
yeah, you start getting data on your first run. After 7 runs, you've unlocked all the insights,
Got it. Okay.
and it'll get smarter over time. So after a few weeks, it's fully calibrated, but all of the insights are unlocked after 7 runs.
Got it. Got it. And since looks like you're supporting offline mode, I'm getting that you're storing the data in the
There's memory on the device.
okay.
Yeah, so you can store up to 20 hours of running without syncing, and then so yeah, it's stored on device, and then the real time is sent if you do run with your phone, and one day we'll also develop an app for your smartwatch too, so that you don't have to run with a phone at all. You can send data over Bluetooth in real time to your phone, and obviously that provides real time audio coaching. And so there's ways that we can coach you during your run to help you stay on your plan. So stay on your running plan. And then there are specific interventions that have been shown to improve running efficiency, improve running performance, potentially even reduce risk of injury. And so we can coach you on how to optimize your form if there are opportunities for improvement in order to improve these things in real time. And so one simple example is cadence, improving your cadence, the steps you take per minute. There's been some pretty good research to show that if your cadence is low, below a certain threshold, which depends on your ability, depends on your height, but if it is low, there may be benefit to increasing your cadence. And so we can coach you on things like this in real time.
That's amazing. And what about the injury prevention piece to it? Because I think it's also real time feedback comes in, or it is more on the weekly snapshot that you get on your performance over the week. Is
Yeah,
that what I
eventually
question?
there will be. Yeah, of course. So
Okay.
so the number one cause of running related injury is making what we call a training error. So in other words, applying more training load than your body is prepared for. So really it's about being proactive and making sure that you know what your body is prepared for every day and every week. So that's a big part of the injury risk management side of things. And then in real time, yeah, one example is of course you fatigue as you run, right? And so that means that your form breaks down as you run. Let's say you're doing a hard run, a workout, interval run, or a long run. As your form breaks down, we can alert you when it breaks down too much, right? And that might be a sign that you're pushing beyond the point where your body is capable.
Yeah.
Um, or maybe you're not, and you can keep going, and we can alert you that hey, you really need to pay attention to your mechanics at that point and really hold strong mechanics for the rest of the run. Or maybe your form is broken down so far that it makes more sense to cut the run short, and not push further because you're putting your body at increased risk. So there's insights around that can be provided as well.
Oh wow, that would be a tremendous value add for runners. 'Cause I know I was talking to Sean Rutford from Trainers One, and I think he has a training coaching app, and he was mentioning that most of his data shows that people get injured during what do you call the track workout. So it basically
Mm.
this speed workouts. That's when the most of the injuries happen versus not the long runs. So maybe it can be a real feedback to figure out is it that analysis or the analysis that he did with that this actually talks the real time that you would probably see once you start collecting the data. Is it more hill workout or the speed workout or the long run that people get to injury more and more? Yeah.
And that's part of the promise here is that honestly, there's a lot of questions that we still have about when runners get hurt and why runners
Yeah.
get hurt. And it's a very complicated problem, again, because each of us is so unique. And so by
Correct.
having more data, I'm not familiar with this app that you just mentioned, but that's an example of by having more data, we can advance our understanding of these things and of injury and performance, and then use that understanding to better help more runners reduce their injury risk and improve their performance.
No, absolutely. And I think it would unlock its biggest challenge because every time I start training for a race, and I'm sure it's every marathon runner, so anyone who's training for a big race, it's like I don't want to get injured because it's the worst thing. You prepare for
Of
months
course.
and months, and a week or two before, get a shin splint or Achilles, whatever it is, and
It's
you bummed
terrible.
out. Yeah,
It's
yeah,
terrible. It's terrible for obviously the physical uh the, the physical pain, but also the fact that you can't run, right? And you can't run this race, this goal that you've been training for. But then also, I don't know about you, but for me, not being able to run has an effect on my mental health too. Like
oh yeah,
it's such
yeah.
an amazing mental health tool. And when it's taken away from me, it's not just the physical effect of not being able to run, it's also the mental effect. So listen, I don't want to pretend to claim that solving this problem is simple and that there's a magic bullet and all of a sudden, if you run in a Avelo shoes, you'll never get injured. But the point is that we can provide more information to runners to help them make smarter training decisions. Ultimately, we see this as a decision support system, which I've touched on this concept in the past, right? Which is that you, as the runner, you need to be in the driver's seat. You have all the context about your training, about your life, about your history, about the life stress that you're under. So you need to be in the driver's seat. You need to make decisions. You can't rely completely on technology to make decisions for you. But by having more information and by using tools like the one that we're developing, we hope that we'll be, first of all, shining a light on a piece of training load that you haven't really had visibility on. And by having that, you'll be able to make smarter decisions in your training to hopefully reduce the risk that you run into these setbacks. Listen, you're always going to have risk
Right,
when you train, when you push your body physically. There's no way
right.
to completely remove that risk, but we want to lower it. And I do believe that creating a world where setbacks and injuries are the exception, not the rule, I believe that's possible. It'll take time to get there, but I'd like to believe, and I believe in the bottom of my heart that it's possible.
Love it. And that's an amazing vision. I wish you all the best that it comes to fruition. I'm sure it will,
Thank you.
for sure. One of the areas I'm very curious, this is 2025, and you are daring to bring in a new shoe brand into the market. So I'm going to curious about the R&D and the product design phase of it. You have put together a world-class team of experts from across the industry in this space, and you're daring to, bring in solve a problem plus bring in a shoe. It's like, how in the world there are so many great brands? Why in the world you want to bring in a new brand? So what is your vision there, and what drove you to bring in? You could have gotten another a smart device. You could have chosen to do,
Yep.
but you choose to bring it with a shoe. What is
Yeah.
your vision there?
Listen, there's no question it's the harder path.
Yes.
We really took the approach of what we felt was best for the runner, what was easiest for the runner to use. And so we believe strongly that by embedding the technology into the shoe and creating the full system, we're creating an experience that's frictionless, that's seamless for the runner, where all you have to do is lace up the shoes and start running. There's no
Right.
additional friction, there's no meaningful behavior change that we're requiring from the runner, for example, to take this gadget or accessory, a
Right.
device, and figure out how to attach it properly, move it from shoe to shoe when they want to use it on different shoes, right? Because a lot of runners use a running shoe rotation. They're not just running in
Yeah.
one shoe all the time. And we can talk about how we're handling that situation as well. Charge it, remove it to charge it, and then remember to reattach it. There's also the reality that, if you create a gadget or an accessory, for example, a pod that you put on your shoelaces, I mean, common sense, but It's on the outside of the shoe. It's attached in a different location by every runner, right? Different lace. The shoe is shaped differently. The foot is shaped differently. It's going to bounce around a little bit as you're running, right? Just from
Right.
the impact vibration of running. And so the quality of the data that you're getting from the sensor is going to be a little bit less, a little bit cleaner, less clean than if you're fixing the sensor inside of the shoe in a fixed location that's under the foot, which has been shown to be the best location for durability, but also sensor quality and accuracy. And so there's really tactical reasons why it makes sense to do this, but ultimately the driving decision factor and decision point was to make a product that was really easy for the runner to use. And so it's more of like the Apple approach to building technology, which is you create the full stack, the full system, right? So
Yeah.
they build software and they also build hardware.
Yeah.
That's not
Yeah.
necessarily right or wrong. It's just the choice that they made, and it's worked very well for them. You have other companies that have taken more of a distributed approach, like Microsoft, which sells software, it sells
Yeah.
this operating system, but it's not necessarily tied to their own hardware. They also
Right.
sell hardware, right? So that's not to say that we can't go in that direction in the future. Because in theory, our technology can be embedded in any running shoe. And maybe in the future, there's opportunities to partner with other running shoe brands. We don't know where the future will take us, but right now we're focused on building the best possible product for runners, the one that's easiest to use, that provides the most value. That
Mhm.
also means we have to create an exceptional shoe because
Oh yeah.
runners will not compromise on an okay shoe just to get some more insightful and valuable data. We know that. And so that's certainly a challenge.
Yeah, I know. We talked about common connection. Mo, I was talking to Mo on this topic. It's like there's a lot of data, there's a lot of gadgets, but what I think ultimately makes the difference is who can give you some meaningful insight that you can action or actionable insight, and that's I think what lacks in most of that. Say, okay, I have this data. What I can do about it? How it can improve me? Because as a
Yeah,
runner, an average runner, that's what I'm asking. I spend a couple of $100 on this gadget. How it is helping me get better, right? I think, and I love the concept of that you're taking the friction away. 'Cause that I think is big because I have to put on a watch and I have to right now if I go for a run and I have to turn on my Strava in order to start tracking, right? So you're taking
hmm
that away, that no friction. I just go as you would go out for anything, and you'll see the data and then you'll get the feedback as well. That's pretty cool.
that's the
Uh,
idea.
Kickstarter journey, your 8x the target goal. I know you mentioned that you wanted to share a little bit about how you are figuring out the different shoes that people are raising. I think I can see in the Kickstarter campaign you have different, um, you know, three layers of shoes. There are three kinds of shoes that people can use. But I'll start with your Kickstarter campaign. So congratulations on an
Thank
amazing
you.
campaign.
Yeah, thank you.
Why did you choose Kickstarter instead of going a traditional way of shoe promotion?
Yeah, I mean, listen, we're still early in our journey. And so Kickstarter is a great platform to build community, to interact with the running community, to have people who believe in the mission and the vision of what you're creating and the product that you're creating support you and be a part of your journey as a company, really from the very beginning, from the earliest stages. And so we felt that it was a great platform for us to leverage, given where we are in our journey, a great chance to finally, for the first time, make our product available for people who believe in it from the earliest stages to get their hands on it, to get
Yeah.
their hands on it first, and to really, again, just be a part of it from the very beginning. And so we felt that Kickstarter was a great step to take as a company, a great community to interface with, and it's not the only method that we're going to make available for runners to get our product. Once the Kickstarter campaign ends, which it's a finite period that it runs for, it'll end in around mid-August. We'll of course continue to interact with the running community. You'll still be able, most likely, to get the product at some point soon after the Kickstarter ends. Of course, there's unique benefits that we're making available to people who back us on Kickstarter, just to reward them for their support
Makes
on
sense.
Kickstarter. But yeah, it was just one step in our journey to get to market, make the product available to runners, finally get the product on runners' feet after, a few years of building it and getting to this point.
That's awesome. 2.5 years in R&D. And I think you
Yeah,
launched the Kickstarter last month in June. I
that's
think
right.
you're wrapping up in August. How difficult or easy it is to make shoe in 2025?
Great question. I think, this is the only experience I've had. And for us, I'm not going to say that it's simple because it's not. I think the team that we've put together is so exceptional that we've really nailed the shoe, and it's in large part because of the people who are involved and who are working on it. My co-founder, Peter Rupi, who's a footwear industry legend and a veteran of, close to 40 years in the industry, building footwear and footwear businesses for brands like Nike, where he spent almost 30 years of his career. Footwear designers and engineers and developers who spent decades at companies like Nike and who have decades of experience building exceptional footwear, including in running, of course. And so, really, we have a team that's done it many, many times before with, over 150 years between them of experience making footwear. And so, for us, it's been, we know how to do it. Our team knows how to do it. And so that's why we've been able to create a shoe that we're getting exceptionally positive reviews from some pretty discerning runners in all of our wear testing so far.
Cool. Um, I know I've talked a little bit about where we're heading in the future, but one question on the shoe side, how does the supply chain related issue or the tariff related issues impact you? Because at the end of the day, I think you have a Kickstarter campaign you're looking at because you're giving one shoe with the device or the chip, the smart chip on it. Does it impact overall the way you're rolling out mass production beginning of next year?
I mean, we're keeping a close eye on it. Thankfully, it doesn't materially impact us.
Okay.
We do have partners in Asia. The reality is that that's where the best
Yeah.
infrastructure, the best skill and talent still resides in, specifically in the footwear industry and the apparel industry. And so, we want to work with the best manufacturers, the best suppliers, the best product people. It hasn't impacted us materially. It's also out of our control, and so we're really focused on
Sure.
what's in
Yeah.
our control.
Yeah.
So we've remained calm through the whole process, and thankfully things have calmed down a little bit. And it's in the best interest of both economies to find a solution, and an agreement that is mutually beneficial. And so, for now, we're in a good spot, and we expect that to continue. And if things for some reason change, we have flexibility, luckily, in our supply chain to be able to navigate those changes in the future if we have to.
Oh, wow. And all the best. And I'm sure it'll work out in its head. I know it's a
Yeah,
lot
thank
of
you.
things going on to and fro, but hopefully it settles down. When I was talking to shareholder of Running USA, I think he was talking about, especially in the running industry, the apparel and the metal that they make kind of impacted with the tariff situation. Some race directors have to increase the fee that goes into organizing the races because they have to.
Of course,
Some of them may be able to, big ones can absorb the cost, but some small races may not be able to
of course.
absorb the cost.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, the last part, I'm very curious. What is the future is talking? So there are so many gadgets, so many devices, help, especially in the endurance sports. And smart shoe is, I think you're solving a lot of problems. Where do you see the ecosystem looks like maybe a couple of years down the road when smart shoe become norm?
Yeah, that's our vision, is to create this category, the smart footwear category, and of course to lead it. And we know that there's so much value that can be unlocked for runners, for the industry, if this is done. And our plan is, of course, to do it. And so we see, and I see, an exciting opportunity to really build this category and lead it. And I think there's really endless runway to build a company that can create a product that unlocks insight from a place where runners and all humans and all athletes have really lacked insight, and that's from the source of our movement, from our feet. And so there's so much we can learn about not just performance, but also health by better understanding how we move and better understanding the forces that are acting on our body. And so that's really our vision, is to unlock these insights, to use it to help runners. And so we're starting with one model, one shoe model. It's the most versatile high performance shoe we could create. It's called the Super Trainer. You can imagine that we will create more models. So we will have a rotation of shoes that you can
Okay.
get any shoe in your quiver from Avelo. One day a racing shoe, one day a non-plated daily trainer, one day a trail shoe, and then variants of each of those. And one of the things that we as a company will be in a unique position to do that really no other company can do as effectively is, and this is something that excited me when I started thinking about this idea, is personalizing or recommending the right shoe for the right runner. based on the way that they move, based on their training history, based on what we're seeing in their biomechanics, can we recommend the right model to the right runner? High or low drop, firm or soft shoe, right? Depending also on that runner's preferences. There's amazing opportunity there. Also, amazing opportunity to use the data that we're collecting to inform our design of future models. How do we design shoes that fit the needs of the runners that we're serving? Again, that's a tremendous opportunity as well on R&D and innovation. And so I see a tremendous opportunity, a really large opportunity to create the next great brand in running
Yeah.
footwear.
Yeah.
And then one day, there's long term, 10 plus years, you can expand to other sports. So, of course, the applications of this technology extend beyond running into really any athletic pursuit, team sports. And then healthcare, is also a very long term, but very exciting, I think, application of human movement monitoring and biomechanics technology to better understand, again, how we move for the purpose of extending and maintaining the number of healthy years that we have on this earth. So I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities and many different applications of this technology. But in the short to medium term, we're focused on building a great brand that serves runners, the next great brand in running.
That's amazing. I'm sold out. I need to order my pair of Avelo shoes for sure, if I can,
Go for it. Absolutely. Yeah.
it's I'm sure any runner who has listened to this conversation or any of your prior conversations, how can none get excited about what the possibility is there? So thank you so much for sharing Avelo's journey and where you're headed. Wish you all the best, and thank you for your time being on the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun. I appreciate it.